Okay, so just a few quick announcements in our meeting document, which I put in the chat again. So first of all, please remember either you or your data manager to review the Hub cataloging and discovery functional specifications document that we talked about 2 weeks ago. Let's see, the research data management and products guide is also available to you, and so we're interested in your feedback from that. We're interested in volunteers for the CINet booth at the FIHM meeting in early June. The deadline for this special issue of the journal, Future Critical Zone Science, has been moved to the end of the calendar year, so please note that. And if you're thinking about submitting, that gives you a little more time to do that. In addition to hearing from the data managers in 2 weeks, we'll hear a little bit of an update on the REU proposal. I think that we're going to resubmit, and there may be an ask from some of you to support that proposal. And yes, Praveen, as Holly responded, the date for the all hands meeting has not been finalized. Holly and I are meeting, I think, later this week to talk about the details, and we should have that to you in 2 weeks. So Luigi, do you want to go ahead and start then? And so I guess let me ask, are there any other questions or announcements that people want to make? Okay, so Luigi, you want to start then with telling us about data management at CINet?
Definitely. Here we go. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, hi everyone. I'm Luigi, and I'm one of the data managers at CINet. Also here with us today is Max Burnett, who is also another data manager for CINet, and he has been doing most of the heavy lifting of what I will present today. And we have had obviously plenty of input on this from the CINet team. So as most of you probably know, CINet is I think the only project in this round that inherited a project called IML-CZO in the previous critical zone observatories, the intensively managed landscape CZO. And so because of that, one of the things that we have had to deal with is how to port and migrate a lot of the data from IML to the CINet data management, so inherit all this data, as well as the systems. Both Max and I have a kind of a software engineering background, and we work at the National Center for Supercomputing Applications. So a lot of the technology that we're using for this project is a technology that we developed over the years using various opportunities, most of those NSF. And so I'm not going to go into the details, the technical details, but one thing to keep in mind is that over the past year or so, we've done a lot of work in terms of also migrating the infrastructure, which again, I'm not going to talk too much about today. So today we're going to focus mostly on the data we inherited, the new data that we have for CINet, and how we're managing it. I'm also going to go pretty quickly through some of these slides. I would like to do a quick demo of some of the systems, but if there's anything, if you have any questions, please feel free to interrupt me. So because we're inheriting IML-CZO, we already have quite a bit of data, and this data, it's fairly large in size. We have about 3 terabytes. Most of that is actually LiDAR data. Obviously, a lot of our data sources are text files, CSV files, DAT files. They're much smaller. But we also have a lot of small files because of some decisions we made on IML-CZO that we'll discuss in a second. So we have quite a bit of stuff in here that we're managing, and we're trying to clean it up as we kind of start CINet. We're trying to clean up the old IML-CZO data, as well as start to manage the new data feeds. I'll talk a little bit about what clowder raw files is in a second in GeoDashboard, but a subset, the bottom line is a subset of this data from sensors gets automatically put in a GeoDashboard, a web interface that shows you locations of sites and also data, usually shown as time series. And so in there, we have quite a bit of data points, where a data point is really just a row in a CSV file for a particular data source. So also because, one of the questions was, okay, what have you published so far? Because, a lot of our data started in IML-CZO data feeds. We already have those published in IDOR-Share. And the way we did it at the time for IML-CZO is we put links back from IDOR-Share to the raw files that are stored in our systems. We don't necessarily plan to do this for CINet. I think we are going to push the actual raw files. But that's something to keep in mind. So we have to keep the URLs and everything, the pointers, valid, so that that published data, doesn't disappear all of a sudden. So I already mentioned it, but I'll show you. We put most of our data in two systems. Almost everything goes into this clowder system, which is basically, like a typical web interface where you upload data manually or automatically gets ingested. And so anybody of our researchers can upload data to the system. And then a subset of that gets shown in this kind of visualization interface, just visual visualization on the right. And I hope to show you both in a second. But behind the scenes, the way we deal with data is we kind of like to talk about, the continuous data, the data that comes directly from the sensors, and the discrete data, for example, resolutions of lab results, right, analysis, where, with the continuous, we try, if we can, to create a continuous pipeline that as soon as the data becomes available, basically automatically uploads it to the systems. But obviously, we have a lot of data that has to manually upload it. And so both feeds, again, go into this repository, this, kind of raw data kind of repository that you need an account to have access to. And a subset can be viewed by anyone using this interface. The other aspect of this is that we're really excited about the data submission portal. And one of the things that we would like to do is to make it just, with a click of a button, make it possible for our researchers to publish directly from this system where we're already curating this information to the data submission portal and finally into the backend repository. So I'll say a little bit about that in a second. Like right now. So again, thank you for the team that is putting together the data submission portal. We're really excited that they're making the APIs available to us. And the goal here is that in that clowder system, we have this ability of launching what we call information extractors on any data set, on any file. And we want to basically add to this list buttons that allow you to submit to the data submission portal using this API. So that's the goal. We're just getting started with it and exploring the data submission portal. One of the things that we got to deal with is the movement of the actual files, because in this case, we would like to put the actual files in IDOR-Share and EarthChem. And so we know that right now, the data submission portal doesn't provide this API, which is fine. But one of the questions is maybe if later on we could provide some kind of proxy to upload the files. If not, we'll deal with the IDOR-Share APIs and the EarthChem APIs. That's perfectly fine. We might need a little bit more help with that. So let's talk about data sets real quick. So one of the ones that we've inherited from IML-CZO is this eddy covariance flux tower. There's several instruments on it. We get the data over LoggerNet. So we have a VM that has LoggerNet on it, and data just shows up on disk. It looks something like that. And then what we do is we do two things. So originally in IML-CZO, we were basically taking every single little file and uploading it to clowder, which we would get basically, I think it was a file every hour with 4 data points on it. That ended up being a lot of small files that were not really helpful to the researchers because they don't want to have to coordinate 10 million files. So what we did is we started kind of in that pipeline creating aggregates both daily and annual. And that was working great. And I think we're going to keep doing this moving forward. But the other thing that also happened is that for the current, when we had to kind of reset some of the modems, we decided to switch just to the mode with LoggerNet, where LoggerNet just appends to a file. And so now what we have is that this file in this data set in clowder basically gets updated every half an hour. And when a researcher comes here, they'll basically get the latest version. Obviously, at some point, we're going to have to put it in the archival yearly data and keep the latest here because it's going to grow pretty fast. But this is a great improvement on what we were doing before. We have also a new instrument, this Licor instrument on the tower. And again, here I'm just showing some of the parameters and measurements that we're taking. It's not comprehensive. This is from the researcher in charge of this instrument. But from a data management perspective, it's interesting because for us, this, we had to set up a machine that would take SFTP, right? The files were copied over. And after that, we deal with it the same way as we do with everything else. But, again, each data source obviously has a different way of moving the data over. And so we need to kind of work with each one. And so what happens is now what we have this continuous data feed as well over SFTP, where again, similar to the prior data feed, you get continuous data. It gets automatically uploaded every time you go there. You'll get the older data as well as the newer data. And then we have one of our technicians who goes out there and gets the very raw data, right, the much finer resolution, and uploads it manually to the same system. And then there's extra stuff, right? Sometimes you'll have the researchers taking pictures, in the field and uploading manuals and documents to it that go with the data. Another data set that is new, this is new to CINet, it's cores analysis. We just started working with this. So here's just a picture of them, one particular one. We do have IGSN IDs for them already. The scientist has created those. And also there is some software that gets used that I'm personally not too familiar with it yet, that is able to extract actual values out of the picture. And so what we have here is a nice data set where there's both pictures as well as numbers in a spreadsheet. I don't know if you're familiar with the River Lab, but this is another really, something, a new lab in the field that has been developed and set up for CINet. And it's the first in North America, where it's basically, getting water directly from the river and doing, various analysis on the water running through it. And so you can see here some of the measurements and isotopes that are coming in. You can see that, we get measurements every 5 minutes. Some other ones every 30 minutes. We're still learning how to properly get the data out of this location. In fact, we download the data from France because the company developed this is in France. So their web services over there. And we're learning and working with them to develop, they're developing the web services and we're pulling data in. And so this is kind of work in progress. But again, we're able to get some basic measurements updated every so often. And now we're working with the chemistry data. One thing to keep in mind is that like the chemistry data, some of this data really requires the researchers to do some serious cleanup of it. And so cannot be used as is. So even though it ends up in clowder, it's not something that we want to share with the world, as you're obviously familiar with these kind of situations. So it's a nice use case where we have raw data just for us, and then the cleaned up data for everybody else, for the net in this case. We're also putting in some management-induced reactive zone sensors. These are there's a location in Nebraska and one in Illinois. So as you can see here, again, you can see what the kind of things that we're tracking. And again, some of it comes every hour and it's manually uploaded, and some of it is manually uploaded bi-weekly. There's also some continuous electricity resistivity measurements that are not there yet, but that the scientists are setting up. And again, they will be uploaded. So there's definitely a big curation step within these systems, right? And then a brief list of some of the other data sets. You can read it briefly, but there's ISCO that I think we're from MLCZO, soil sensors, weather stations, and a couple of other sites, groundwater wells again, and a new one that we're setting up related to storm event river data. So there's a lot of different data feeds. So as you can imagine, because this is, this is like a box, right? We put data in there, it's organized in folders, data sets, files. One of the big kind of challenges always, just like any other box folder or Google Drive folder, is how do you organize it? So we're doing quite a bit of work right now to make sure that we clearly label what's IML CZO data. And for that, we're creating this IML CZO archive space. Spaces are ways for us to manage access control. And then we have all these other ones like App Analysis, MERS, Derivative Lab. And this allows us to basically say, there's certain scientists that can add people, allow others to get access to it and upload data. And then there is other users that can only read. So pretty straightforward stuff. But we're doing some cleanup compared to what we're doing with IML CZO. We're trying to track as much metadata as possible in our systems, and we have a few ways of doing that. Obviously, the hard part is actually getting, the metadata in, not just, having the ability to put metadata in. But for example, as you can see here, Allison, for one of her data sets, put some, basic information, which of course we're gonna map to what the data submission portal requires, right? So we want to make sure that all those fields are filled in right away. We have ways to ingest and use standard vocabularies from external web services. And right now we have support for CSDMS and ODM2 variables. But again, we can add more since they're web services. They can look up, to external lists of the standard vocabularies. So depending on what the network ends up wanting to use, we will use that. Light turns off every so often. Lastly, we are doing kind of revisiting something we did a while back that I hope to maybe show the next time we meet, which is the ability of when a file shows up, being able to automatically annotate it. So not having the user say, well, there's temperature and temperature is equivalent to this ODM2 term. And it's basically, we're doing some of this work, but the bottom line is that, we will match headers of the files. If we've seen it already, we'll basically add the standard vocabulary terms that we're familiar with. If not, we won't do anything. And this was work that we did for EarthCube. Praveen was the PI many years ago. Finally, and this is something that we weren't doing with IML, is we are trying to make sure that we put as much metadata as possible with the data in there. So we're coming up with a little bit of a different structure. So this is something that we as data managers, we manage this metadata. Obviously, we get it from the researcher and the technicians, but it's basically it's JSON documents. The nice thing is that you can search them. We're tweaking a few things on how you do this, but that means that if you search for a specific parameter, for the entire system, you might find data that you're not even familiar with, that you didn't even know was there. Ideally, the same terms across all the data sets. And then one quick slide about this data visualization system. So you can see there is a map with all the locations. This is a subset again, some overlays there. For this project right now, we're primarily doing time series, but we have the ability of doing other type of visualizations, and everything is driven by this JSON, GeoJSON web API. So this is what a data point looks like. And we have different data sources in there. Even public data sources like USGS. Okay, so what is working? So we like this idea of the 3 stages for continuous data, right? On disk, from LoggerNet, SFTP, web service. Then we aggregate things in clowder in a potentially raw format. And then once we're ready to share them with the public, we have this public visualization dashboard. We are, kind of tweaking how we organize things, because that's obviously, we want to make it as easy as possible for people to find things. And the structural metadata ability is really helpful. What we could use help with, again, we're really thankful for the DSP API. We're really excited to be using it. So obviously we'll have questions about that. The other part is we're probably going to ask for help with EarthChem only because we're not as experienced with it as we are with iDoShare. And so, we really appreciate the seminar that was given, but obviously we'll have questions. Areas where we see the need for see a need or opportunity for greater collaboration is obviously we're looking to hopefully develop standard vocabularies and terms across all the disciplines and all the clusters. So we look forward to having that conversation with everybody else. Also, you know, one of the things that we always struggle with, I'm sure everybody does, is a label missing data and randomness data. So it would be nice if, again, there would be like, you know, we agreed on some standard way of doing that across all the clusters. And then maybe, you know, have some kind of level, you know, 0, 1, 2, 3 standard to describe the quality of the data. Because like I've said, we do have some data sets where we have the data that, you know, is very raw. But if we knew how to label it, then we could make it very explicit for the user at what level that was. All right, so I hope I didn't go too quickly through that. And do I have just a second to give a quick demo?
If it's really quick. So we got two more presentations.
Okay, yeah, I'll do it really quick. So this is the CINet cluster interface. There's a few links to some of the systems. So here's the clowder interface. This is, I'm already logged in, so I can follow people and data sets, and I can see activity and be notified of things. So I'm going to go to the spaces, and I'm going to look, for example, lab analysis has, you know, data that is manually uploaded. This is that course data, both images as well as other things. If we go back to spaces and I look at the Flux tower, for example, we'll see that we have multiple instruments, multiple data sets. This is the one that gets updated automatically over here. This is also the one that has some of that more interesting metadata. And so, you know, we can do searches across the entire space where you have access to. So we can search for, you know, just keywords like this, and it'll search inside both the descriptions of the data set, the files, and everything else. But we can also do more targeted kind of metadata search. So for example, everything that has frequency in minutes, and then we'll see that not only we have the Flux tower, which we're looking at, but also the River Lab, you know, so pretty standard stuff. And then we can manually annotate, like I said, CSTMS standard name, ODM. So this pulls it from, you know, different web services that we maintain. And so you can submit and add it manually. So this is automatically added, this is added manually. There is a social tagging functionality that it's left to the users to kind of use. So you can see, you know, the tags they've seen so far. This is very free form, right? So you don't know what's going to happen, you know, what people are going to tag with. And then real quick, and then I'll take questions. We can go back and look at the dashboard. So research, search and download data here. And we're tweaking some of the things here, but we have two views, you know, the usual kind of view where you zoom in and then you can start looking at specific, sites. Or this view over here where they're organized by type and data source. And so if I zoom in, this AmeriFlux, it's actually not our Flux tower, it's the American Flux tower. We had ingested some data in it. So we can look at it at everything is binned by years or months, depending on the time range. So if we zoom in, this is for year, we do this automatic binning, this is at the date level, right? And so this is all managed behind the scenes. Which kind of helps with exploring and, you know, organizing this data. And so we can just look quickly if we go to maybe our Flux tower.
So Luigi, we probably need to move on. Okay. We got two more. Yep. Thank you, and thank you for putting the link to the clowder space there in your slides. So and I appreciate you addressing the three questions that we had put forward. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
So I think next is Sue Parsons with Dryland, correct?
That's right. So,
okay. Hi, Sue.
Hi. Let me share my screen here, if I may. Okay. Let's see if I can get my.
Sue, you might want, swamp the display.
There we go. Okay, can everybody see my screen and hear my voice?
Yes.
Fantastic. Let me just minimize my own head here. Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Sue Parsons, the data manager for the Dryland cluster. I'm also a GIS analyst, so I help out with spatial data as well. My talk will be quite a bit different today than Luigi's. We're kind of more at the introductory grassroots kind of approach to data management, and I'll be emphasizing more of the human component. Yes. So before I begin discussing data management, I'd like to quickly review what the main research foci of the Dryland cluster are. We study patterns and controls of carbon dioxide fluxes, ecohydrology, and nutrient availability on the carbonate-dominated Dryland critical zone. And to break that down a little bit more into the three main research directions, we'll be looking at water as a critical control in Dryland's architecture, function, and services, carbon stocks and atmosphere land carbon exchange, and then phosphorus loading, mobility, and acquisition in Dryland critical zones. Here's a summary of our expected data sets. And I'm probably not going to just read these to you if you want to go back and read them, but needless to say, we have quite a bit going on from hydrogeophysical data, nutrient data, carbon data. We have eddy, flux towers, soil cores. It runs the gamut. So we have project participants at the University of Texas in El Paso, Boise State University in Idaho, New Mexico State University, University of Wyoming, and then we have our USDA colleagues in Kimberly, Idaho, Reynolds Creek Experimental Watershed near Murphy, Idaho, and the Jornada Experimental Range in Las Cruces, New Mexico. And so this describes a rather interdisciplinary team located in a lot of different geographic areas with overlapping research foci, and we've generally organized ourselves into subgroups: carbon, nutrients, hydrogeophysics, and education and outreach. And so with this much going on, we've adopted collaborative web-based platforms, and our basic approach leverages the use of a number of different data management tools, including but not limited to Microsoft Teams, GIS, websites, which I'll go into a little bit later, and Quasi's data submission portal. So many of you are likely already acquainted with Teams, which is Dryland's main organization and collaborative platform. Membership allows participants to access various features such as channels, chats, files, datasets, GIS layers, and other useful things like pictures and logos, as well as helping us maintain our master participants list. A few features I'd like to orient you to, and let me see if I can figure out how to actually queue this up. That's not working. Let's see. Make that smaller. Got too many screens going on here. Okay, so a few things I wanted to orient you to here. We have our different subcluster groups. We also have this data channel. And we have been storing all of our provisional data sets here. And Teams uses SharePoint as a backend. And we have these roughly organized by subgroup and just data type. So like in carbon, we also have some of our tower data in here. In this channel, we also have some metadata templates and metadata information and guidance. I usually point people to either the Jornada one if they're working at Jornada or the CZO one. And we also have these data collection matrices. And in each one of these, they're broken out by lab group or research cohort. And we have people go in here and we have like a master list of these, of all the different anticipated data sets from each group in each project. And these are vetted about hopefully once a semester, where all of the different PIs and students come in and they fill out the variable that they're looking at, the sites they're doing them at, the status, the link to the GIS, the link to the data in SharePoint, start date, end date, frequency, location notes, the permit, target repository. I think keywords are going to be in here. We even audit the students to make sure that they have these different components addressed. And that's a really key component of our data management. I'm going to move on. Let's see. Is everyone still seeing my page pretty good here?
Yes.
Okay, great. So another main organizational and data management tool I'd like to show today is our Dryland CZ website. This is our separate subcluster project website, and it has a lot of stuff on it specific to our group's needs. We have our participant bios, which are great for highlighting the expertise in our group and finding folks' contact info. There's also info and resources. I'm just going to go ahead and cue that up and just sort of orient you to what we've got there. So featured prominently right here is a link to the CINet website. So if you are looking for like the overall theme of all these different subclusters, you can go there. We have research, where we have a description of each one of our 4 research sites. We have our people, bios, grad students, collaborators, investigators. The info and resources is an important one because it has our calendar, because we have these different subgroup meetings, and this kind of keeps track of that and provides an agenda and links to that. We also have our metadata page. I have a metadata survey. It's really meant to collect information about projects early on in their timeline. So this is just a PDF version of that, but essentially what it does is it collects participant information, their role, we get an abstract, a bio, a project title, keywords, the committee or investigators who were on that project, your funding sources and the % contribution, start date, end date, a place to upload your field site locations, expected data sets and timeline, and then just orienting folks to other things that they need to know about like fieldwork scheduling apps and things like that. We also have links to the CIN interim data guidelines and their metadata suggestions, how to acknowledge the grant, and the different research sites and whatnot. We also have links to existing data sets in GIS for the different, we have a lot of Reynolds Creek data, we have Jornada data, and then people who are in our project, we don't have a ton of mature data sets yet. We have some Ameriflux data that's ready to distribute that's specific to Drylands, but we're still early on in that. We also have our opportunities, and this is mirrored to the CZCN website as well. And we have news and events. I'm going to just continue for the sake of time. Alrighty. So pretty much everything we're doing at this point is intended to, kind of dovetail nicely with the initiatives at the network level. We do try to mirror all of our content onto the CZCN website, and also, use their guidance for data publication. We have every intention of using the data submission portal. I've had a look at the beta version of that, and when it's fully active, there'll be prominent links to that as well as the Foci library of our critical zone data sets. And we've been actively plugging the Foci data help sessions on our project calendars and emails. One aspect of data management that I haven't touched on yet is reporting, which is obviously very important and time consuming. A number of our efforts include reporting or support reporting, including our detailed products list. We have a Zotero detailed products list that's kind of nice. That's just an online, you may be familiar with that. I won't probably go into it now for the sake of time. And then in future directions, the first one I kind of want to show you is our Shiny app for towers. So using currently this lives on the cloud, but Moritz Tozer, who is a new faculty at UTEP, is going to be working with a lot of our towers. We have, I think, 5 towers currently that is going to be that we're using with the Dryland data sets. We have 2 at Jornada. We've got the Bajada and we've got the Playa site towers. We also have one at our Pecan field. And then we're using a tower at Reynolds Creek, and we're using another one in Kimberly. And so our intention is to stand up basically Shiny apps for all 5 of these. And they're just kind of fun because you can look at the different variables and kind of plot them against each other. And this is something that, Dr. Moritz is working on, but we're just kind of creating a place for these to live right now. Another initiative we have is we're pushing all of our GIS data into ArcGIS Online and building different apps to kind of look and visualize and eventually like download all of our different GIS data associated with our different projects. So for example, if we go to Jornada, we've got apps really for each one. So these are the Jornada base layers, and we have embedded this into our website as well. And it's just kind of a nice data visualization option. And it's also, you can hook into this. It functions kind of like a GIS server. You can hook into it using ArcMap, or you can use ArcGIS Online, and you can just kind of pull all these different layers into your own maps. And that's a nice feature. Another thing I wanted to talk about was we are ramping up to do a bunch of social media, and that'll be included on our websites as well. And then we want to mirror the majority of our content onto the CZCN website. So this brings me to my last slide, issues and questions. The big issue that I think I've always had when trying to work with data management is compliance, actually getting PIs and students to do what you're asking them to do in every component of it. And they're busy, and I get it, but that's like an never-ending issue. And another question I have is, does it really make sense for us to list provisional metadata on Foci now when it's likely to change, since we're fairly early in our project? Because that's yet another request you're making. You're like, I want metadata, and then I'm going to go ahead and post it on Foci, even though it's probably going to change. And then my third kind of issue or / question that I have for folks is, should we really cross-list data from Jornada and Reynolds Creek on the Dryland critical zone Foci holdings, basically padding our data sets for a strong early showing while the rest matures? Because there's a lot of data that that's published under Reynolds Creek CZO that we could also use for Dryland CZ. Same goes for the Jornada experimental range. There's a lot there that we could put under the Dryland CZ. There's certainly the stuff on Ameriflux, which I don't have too much of an issue putting there, but it's just sort of a question, really like a philosophical question for the project leadership. Is that what you want us to do, or do you want us to wait until Dryland specific funded data sets that are like quite pure in their origin? Do you want that in our library? And that's the end of my talk.
Thanks, Sue. So I don't know, Jeff, do you want to, Horsburgh, do you want to address Sue's last question real quickly, or no? I mean, my own inclination is it's not padding. Luigi talked about data from the CINet CZO days as part of their overall data set. And so if you're using the data as a part of your analysis, I wouldn't see it as padding, but I don't know, Jeff, do you want to address that?
Yeah, my answer is pretty similar. Like I wouldn't necessarily see that as padding if they're data sets that you're collaborating on and you're actually devoting resources of your thematic cluster to either collecting, partnering, or managing, or publishing, or whatever step along the process you're contributing to. I think the key here is, and this is hard for everybody, what are the specific products that are being produced that need to be shared in a way that other people can access them? And those products may be, as you said, Sue, purely from your thematic cluster, but they may not be. They may be partnership products. And I see no problem with you listing and promoting and participating in collaborative works that are jointly produced with other organizations. We knew from the beginning that this was going to happen. So I wouldn't see that as padding, but I would just make it clear when you're doing your reporting that these are partnerships that are productive and these are products that are coming out of those partnerships.
So thanks. So I'm going to move us on. So give Ivan some time. So Ivan, I believe you're on now for Bedrock.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, hello everyone. I'm gonna fire up my presentation in a moment. Okay. So hi again. So my name is Ivan Rabak. I'm Steve's research scientist at Virginia Tech. And I'll quickly brief you on the status of our data management progress. So everyone can hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So here's a very simple abstract slide I have that illustrates what we're dealing here at Tech. So we have two sets of data, right? And that's pretty, I think, self-explanatory. We have this descriptive data set, and we have the instrument data set. So descriptive data set, I decided to call everything that is not collected by an instrument, right? So we go out in the field, and so we collect two sets of data. So the instrument data that are generally proprietary binary data. So they can be collected by seismic instruments, they can be collected by GPS instruments, and GPS instruments can provide some first order solutions that are in an open format, and other files that help you reprocess the data. And so these data are in the binary format, the proprietary binary format. So there's a bunch of other than file formats, flat and JPEG files, right? So, but then back on the left-hand side is what, in a way, an observer collects, what kind of data collects. So these data are collected in pre-formatted Google Sheets. So it makes it very easy for an observer to collect the right type of data. So let's say in the case of the seismic data, it's location, who's collecting the data, everything related to the seismic array, and without going into too many details. So that's very well structured, what we're collecting. And so out of these two columns, there's two set of products we'll be providing. So the primary products are basically our instrument data that are tagged, so that the team can find the data and the people outside the team can find the data. And then the second tier is the derived products. And these are the products that are sitting right below, in a way, the hierarchy of things, just below the published papers. So the idea that the published papers will have digital object identifiers that will be directing the reader to HydroShare and to actual workflows, models, raw data, and everything else that we find important to deliver. And that's an open-ended subject, but we can talk about it in more detail. So again, on the left-hand side, we have the descriptive data we collect. On the right hand, we have the instrument data. Then we have our primary set of products, which is basically instrument data that is tagged appropriately, and we'll go into more detail about that. And then we'll worry about the right products, which can be models, workflows, and everything that can help our reviewer to repeat the steps and produce figures that appear in scientific papers. Okay. So what does that mean in actuality? So what are our data? So here's an example what we're dealing with in terms of our data. So, and there's a few sites, actual collection sites here that are just located on the East Coast. And these are just two sites. So we have one more site, but to fit things in the slide, I decided to keep it as busy as it is. So here's our first level. So we have South Carolina Piedmont site, and we have a Panola site, it's out in Georgia, right? And this is in South Carolina. Then the principal sites are divided in sub-sites, which can be trenches, It can be virtual critical zones. It can be principal transects that the seismic will cover, GPR will cover, and other kinds of instruments. Right? So the same applies for a different site. Again, trench, multiple trenches, multiple critical zones. And then these trenches are surveyed by individual lines, right? So the profiles can be, of course, in multiple numbers. And I would just like to make a little distinction here that we're calling something a transect and we call it something a line. So transect is a general profile that is usually collected by a seismic team, right? That gives you a really good idea what's going on in your area of interest. And then these can be individual targets, right? So that can be targeted also with seismic data, circular seismic deployments and such. And so these are the instruments we're using to do the surveys. And this is not a complete list. And I'll show you that in a little while, what the complete list looks like. So we are surveying with GPR, GPS, seismic data, EM data, and there's a bunch of other instruments, and I'll show you that in a bit. So what does that look like? So it's all time-stamped, right? Because you go out in the field and you have your June experiment that takes place on the 22nd, and so on, and similar for all kinds of other data types. And then you have a bunch of nodes that are associated with this data. And so I think this is pretty clear for people who were out in the field, and it's going to ring very familiar. So nothing really specific about this slide. Is just showing kind of also somewhat on the abstract level the data we're dealing with. So what is that again, in a more practical sense? So this is what most of our data, pretty much actually all of our data that we care about are currently sitting on Google Drive. And this is the first subfolder of our Bedrock Critical Zone folder. So there's, of course, please you don't have to pay attention to any of this, but where the line, what these folders underline. So there's a bunch of folders that carry important data that we decided to save. And I would like to point out that, for example, we recorded some Zoom meetings, and this will be key in deciding, well, what goes to HydroShare? What are we going to actually, what are we going to archive in HydroShare? And so clearly not all of this will go there. So what will go there for sure is field data and nodes. Okay, so what does that look like? So again, like I showed in that our second to previous slide, so there's sites. So we have a Boulder Creek site, which is actually on the East Coast. So let's go back to the East Coast. So we have a Panola site, and we have Piedmont site. And so we have a bunch of subfolders here. And here you can have the data that we collected. So we have drone data, we have electromagnetic data, we have photos, geomorphology-ready data, GPS, LiDAR, and the rest, magnetics, mapping-ready data, already some products clearly, then resistivity, seismic, toll station data, and so on and so on, right? So this is what our folder structure looks like. So the take-home question is how do you map this to HydroShare, right? So, well, that depends on how we will look for the data and actually who our clients are, right? So if your client is a team member, that makes it very easy because they will look most likely for sudden profile, and most likely they were in the field, and most likely they uploaded some of the data to Google Drive, so they know how to find it. But how will the rest of the community find the data? So that will all sit probably in the keyword space, right? But this is again a very abstract level, and that still needs to be worked out. And it'll be worked out because the data are proprietary. It'll have to be worked out within the team initially. So how am I doing on time?
We have maybe 6 or 7 minutes.
Okay, yeah, I can, yeah, I'll wrap it up pretty soon.
Thank you.
So there's, within our team, we take care of our data, of course, within our team, and it's going to be long-term storage. And that, as I mentioned, obviously, clearly it goes to HydroShare, and some of it to CSAR, and some of it will go to EarthChem that for some reason didn't show here. And within our team, we do the procedure is data are collected by our field equipment, goes to field backups. Eventually, once you make the folder, if you work on a folder, you make it offline available, and it's going to be on your personal computer, and then it sits on Google Drive. And Google Drive will most likely remain our collaborative space. So again, this is right. The key question is creating metadata. So we have 2 sets of metadata. It's going to be photos of actually physical notebooks, and my job will to make these IT friendly, or metadata friendly, and then we'll have electronically generated documents that can be parsed into keywords, right? So, and like I mentioned earlier, we'll have to do the initial testing will be done with the team, where the metadata are really helping find the instrumental data. So I guess I mentioned this a little previously. So HydroShare will be our principal archiving site for our geophysical data, and then CSAR will be taken care of by the University of Wyoming, and of course us. And then EarthChem will be the home for geochemical data and XRF and data and other data. And I think my final slide is the upload progress. It's very easy to upload the data, but the key will be how to make connection between HydroShare and other data storage silos. So that will be one of the key questions that we need to resolve. Also, what secondary products to make available in HydroShare. So that will be one of the key questions we'll have to be dealing with. And some technical questions are that some of our docs and data and files are not directly uploadable to HydroShare because they are shared docs, and so a snippet will have to a snippet in time will have to be made, and we'll have to decide on the final version of our documents. And so, and be compliant with specific HydroShare requirements, and again, work out specific metadata and keywords for our data products. So this is what I have. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, thank you. So we probably don't have time for questions at this point. Yvonne and Sue, if you could send your presentations to Maddie Scranton, m.scranton@quasi.org, then we can post those along with the recording. And if any of you have questions for anyone who presented today, feel free to reach out to them directly or post the questions in our meeting notes, and we can get those addressed. So thank you. Well, this has been really enlightening to me. I hope it has been to you, and we will do this again in 2 weeks. So thank you, everyone.
Jerry.